The top business stories live from the Sky News City studio. The IMF says the UK economy is heading for a soft landing as it raises its growth forecast for the year. Grocery inflation falls to its lowest level since October 2021. Plus, financial services and software giant Stripe announces a major expansion in the UK. I'll be speaking with one of the co-founders. Good morning, this is Business Live with me, Ian King. The International Monetary Fund says the UK economy is heading for a soft landing and has raised its forecast for GDP growth from 0.5% to 0.7% for the year. Speaking in the last few minutes, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt said the IMF's assessment showed the UK economy had turned a corner. However, the IMF reiterated its message that the Chancellor should not have cut national insurance at the last two fiscal events. Kristalina Georgieva, the IMF's Managing Director, is speaking now. We're just going to briefly listen to what she has to say.
Used fiscal buffers extensively, that they must do more to rebuild these buffers. Why are we saying that? For a very simple reason. We do not, in a world of more uncertainty, we do not know when there may be again a call on governments to have to spend, to borrow more, to spend more. Let's remember where we're coming from. We had a prolonged period of very low interest rates, down to negative interest rates. What happened in this period? Governments, companies, households borrowed. They accumulated debt with low interest rate, very bearable, until it wasn't. So then we were hit by two consecutive shocks, interest rate jumped, and that reminded us that we have to put an extra attention to fiscal prudence.
Okay, let's go right here. Joel.
There we go. Just to break into that for a moment, we've just got some breaking news. Bedfordshire police say they are investigating the stabbing of a woman near a school in Dunstable Road in Luton shortly after 8:30 this morning. The victim's been taken to hospital with serious injuries. One man has been arrested and is currently in police custody. All children are safe within the school and there's no wider threat to the public. More on that as we have it. Grocery inflation has eased to its lowest level since October 2021, according to industry data released this morning. Kantar World Panel, which tracks supermarket till prices, sales and market share, says its market share measure of grocery inflation slowed to 2.4% in the 4 weeks to the 12th of May from 3.2% the previous month. It was the 15th consecutive month during which grocery price inflation has fallen. Well, joining me now is Tom Steele. He's Strategic Insight Director at Kantar. Tom, good morning to you. Are there any categories where grocery inflation remains elevated?
There are. Where we're seeing grocery inflation remain the highest is around kind of confectionery, so whether that's chocolate or sugar, so obviously some of the nation's favourites, and chilled fruit juices as well, where we're still seeing those prices pertain at high levels of inflation. However, we are seeing some categories actually deflate, so that means obviously the prices are getting cheaper in the likes of staple items like milk and butter.
Well, that's encouraging news. I mean, over the last couple of years, one of the big features of the market has been this switch to supermarket own brand labels. Do you think that's going to remain entrenched even now inflation is falling?
That's definitely what we're seeing at the moment. So for the second consecutive month, we've seen own label outgrow brands within the spend growth. And it's the likes of premium own label, actually, where we're seeing really strong growth rates, which is helping own label perform ahead of brands. So even though it does show that own label is being favoured over brands, it does show that we're starting to be a bit more comfortable and spend a bit more money with the likes of premium own label faring better than what we had previously seen, a year or so ago, where it was all about value own label or standard own label. So the tide is starting to turn.
Now, one thing that really struck me looking at the market share figures is just the extent to which Tesco and Sainsbury's are extending their lead over the rest of the sector.
Exactly. We've seen Tesco and Sainsbury's both increase their share this month, but we've also seen that come through for the likes of Lidl and for Ocado. And Ocado remained the fastest growing retailer within our read on a 12-week ending basis. And we can see a lot of that is incentives that they're offering their consumers to shop with them. So shopping online in terms of offering them 25% off their first shop. So that's one of the key reasons why we're seeing Ocado doing really well this month. But yeah, likewise, Tesco and Sainsbury's doing well as well.
Tom, the other thing that really jumped out at me in terms of the market share is that Aldi's market share has actually slipped. Does that mean the sort of days of their breakneck expansion are over?
I'd say the important thing to reflect on with Aldi is they are still in value growth, and where they were this time last year was a really strong position. So they're lapping some of that performance from last year too. So even though they have seen their share slightly slip back, it's from some of those record levels that we had seen last year. So definitely still think Aldi will still be one to watch going forwards, but their performance more recently is more challenged.
Tom, one thing that we talked about a lot in the past has been the extent to which the market is very, very promotional. Is that still the case? What sort of proportion of goods going through the tills are on offer just now?
So in the latest 4 weeks, what we see is around 28.7% of all sales come through some form of promotion. They're mainly price cuts. And overall, if we look back to now versus this time last year, what we can see was within the grocery market, there's about £500 million being spent on promotion this year versus last year. And obviously, that's a huge amount of money that we're seeing come through. But it's really no surprise, because what we're seeing a lot of the retailers do at the moment is talk to us as shoppers through advertisements or kind of wider media campaigns, all about how much price they're investing back into us to encourage us to shop with them. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised in the coming weeks and months, particularly as we enter summer, where retailers will really be talking to us about further price investment that they're making in order to make us shop with them.
OK, Tom, have to leave it there. Good to see you this morning. Thank you. Some other stories for you now. And AstraZeneca set out plans today to raise its annual sales to $80 billion by the end of the decade, up from $45.8 billion last year. At a major presentation to investors in Cambridge, the UK's biggest company said this would be achieved through significant growth in its existing oncology, biopharmaceuticals and rare disease portfolio, and by launching an expected 20 new medicines before the end of the decade. Sir Pascal Soriot, the chief executive, said many of these new medicines have the potential to generate more than $5 billion in annual sales at their peak. The parent of South West Water said today it will pay around £3.5 million in compensation to customers affected by last week's parasite outbreak in Brixham in Devon. Pennon Group said normal service had now been restored for 85% of the more than 16,000 households and businesses affected. Well, Pennon was reporting an underlying operating profit of £166.3 million for the year to the end of March. That was up 8.6% on the previous 12 months. The company's cut its final dividend by £2.4 million to reflect fines imposed on it last year for sewage spills, although the overall payout for the year is still up by 3.8%. The owner of B&Q and Screwfix reassured investors today it's not changing its full-year profits forecast, despite reporting a 0.9% drop in sales for the 3 months to the end of April on a like-for-like basis. Kingfisher, which is Europe's biggest do-it-yourself retailer, blamed weakness in its French business, which more or less wiped out sales growth elsewhere. It said B&Q grew sales during the period, particularly in tools and hardware and building and joinery, which helped make up for weak sales of big-ticket categories, with wet weather in April also playing a part. Screwfix sales also grew strongly. It's on course to open 40 stores this year. And the airport and railway station catering group SSP today predicted a bumper summer in Europe, with both the Paris Olympics and the European Football Championships in Germany helping boost footfall. The company, whose brands include Upper Crust and Ritazza, has 160 outlets across Paris's airports and also operates at Berlin, Frankfurt, Düsseldorf, Stuttgart and Cologne airports, and at railway stations in Berlin, Dortmund, Stuttgart, Leipzig, Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, Cologne and Hamburg. SSP was reporting an operating profit of £58 million for the year, 6 months to the end of March. That was up 19% on the same period last year. Now, the financial services and software giant Stripe has today announced a major expansion in the UK that will see it provide business financing for small businesses. The digital payment specialist, which at $65 billion is one of America's most valuable private companies, is also launching a new payment method called Pay by Bank, which it claims will reduce payment costs. Well, with me now is John Collison. He's co-founder of Stripe. John, great to see you this morning. I know you're not disclosing the size of the investment, but can you give me an idea on what this will mean for your headcount here in the UK?
Absolutely. So yeah, we're opening a new office today. People are actually wheeling Aeron chairs, and getting the move done as we speak. New office in Bishopsgate to kind of house our UK expansion, and so we'll be having hundreds of people in the UK and hiring, based our UK headquarters here in London. And more broadly, the UK market is just really motoring for us, doing really nicely. The number of tech company formations was up 22% last year. We are at the highest ever level of kind of number of businesses going live on Stripe. You'd expect that to maybe have been during the pandemic when people were coming online in droves. We're actually seeing a higher level now than we did even then. And so that's why you're hearing, you mentioned some of the product launches that we have today, but we're really doubling down.
Yeah, I mean, central to the expansion is business financing. What made you realise that there was a need for this service?
Look, I think you can talk to any small business and they'll say getting a loan is a pain in the neck. Half of loan applications are actually denied. And I would say just generally, maybe since the financial crisis, the large banks have pulled away somewhat from that core lending activity as it's gotten more expensive. The cost of servicing those businesses has gone up. Stripe is different. We serve businesses online. We don't have any Stripe stores or anything like that. We are purely online, and businesses are using us to accept payments from their customers around the world. So since they're running on Stripe and since their cash flows run through Stripe, we actually have a pretty good idea of how the business operates, and we have the ability to underwrite them. And so what will happen is, starting today, they'll just pop into their Stripe dashboard and they might see the option to get capital from us and be very simple, loan with terms and everything like that. And so it really just skinnies down the amount of work required in getting a loan. And we are very excited about this because, again, when you talk to small businesses, one of the main things holding them back is availability of growth capital. And so we're trying to really simplify and streamline that for small businesses and make the process much smoother.
What do you think will be the sort of typical sum that you advance, John, and what will be the sort of typical duration of a loan?
The amounts we're talking about are kind of 10 or 20,000 pounds. And so that order of magnitude. And then, people are generally borrowing for, a year or something like that. It's expansion capital. And so often what they're doing is financing inventory, financing marketing spend, because again, they have the ability to acquire customers. They just need the capital to go do it. And so that's the kind of, loans that we're talking about.
And in terms of pay by bank, which I also mentioned there, how will that differ from the existing capabilities you offer?
So people use Stripe today generally to accept payments from their customers, and they'll generally use a credit card for that, right? And so that's how most customers are using Stripe today. We have seen tremendous progress in, with open banking in the UK, with making direct bank push payments a payment method. And I think you've seen over the last maybe 5 years, people getting more used to that as a way of paying. And so what this pay by bank means today is that, again, if you're running an online business, you can accept credit cards, you can accept BNPLs, and now you can accept just a direct bank payment through open banking as another way for your customers to pay.
Now, John, while we've got you, I'd love to know your views on how you think things are in Silicon Valley right now. It was obviously 2022 was very tough for VC-backed businesses and early last year. What's the mood like just now?
Yeah, I think you always have to pull apart here the funding environment from what is actually happening on the ground and the real progress. And the reason I say this is obviously, things in 21 were totally wackadoodle with, all these insanely priced rounds. But I would say the actual substance of what's happening in 24 is really, really good, where you have this, AI boom, where there are very meaningful productivity gains and product enhancements happening. And we just see really good stuff in the data in the terms of the rate of new startup formation. And again, even if, valuations are not the peak of 2021, it's just really high quality businesses that are being built. And again, same thing we see in the UK, where, the valuations will jump around a little bit, but in terms of the fundamental quality and number of new tech firms we're seeing spinning up, we have not seen the likes of it before.
Now, you and your brother, Patrick, your co-founder, have just made an investment in an AI business called Cognition. Can you see yourself placing more bets like that in future?
Absolutely. I mean, we are just seeing all manner of super interesting AI companies come about. It's a very fast growth sector for Stripe, where we're powering all the leading AI companies, OpenAI and Perplexity and Mistral and Anthropic and companies like this. So it's a very fast growth sector for Stripe broadly. And again, I think the big thing is that We don't know how the AI space will shake out. It's very fast moving, but clearly there's very real benefits for businesses where it makes the, there are real productivity gains that are going to happen. And everyone always gets into this, robots taking all the jobs narrative and things like that. I think that's the wrong way to look at it, where yourself, like AI tools can make you individually more productive. So the way we look at it is, okay, if there's someone at Stripe, how can we deploy AI advancements to make them 10% more productive or 20% more productive? I think that's the more useful way, or at least that's the way we think about it in deploying AI at Stripe.
OK, John, we have to leave it there, I'm afraid. It's really good to catch up with you this morning. Thanks ever so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the FTSE 250 property company Assura is teaming up with the university's superannuation scheme to launch a £250 million joint venture to invest in essential NHS infrastructure. The partnership will support investment into essential NHS community healthcare buildings and is planned to run for an initial 20 years. Assura also reported earnings of £102.3 million for the year to the end of March, up 6% on the previous 12 months. I've been speaking with the chief executive, Jonathan Murphy.
We've been looking for a partner to work with us on funding NHS projects for a while. So these are very attractive investments, but they're very keenly priced because they're very long dated leases with indexation. So getting a bit pricey for us, given our cost of capital. So we were looking for a partner, the right type of partner to work with us on delivering this type of essential infrastructure for the NHS, and delighted to have been working with NHS for months now in the background to get to this stage. We've just announced a £250 million a scheme to support further investments in community projects. So you're really pleased to have found that type of partner.
Will the assets you invest in differ greatly from those in your existing portfolio?
No, they're very, in fact, it's just a certain type of asset. So they generally are the larger assets, those that are let direct to the NHS. So they will be the larger GP surgeries or the sort of larger facilities that we do for NHS hospitals. It'll be those types of assets. The larger ones, longer leases with indexation. Those will be the key criteria.
Now, turning to the results, you've 8 developments on the go at the moment. What are you seeing in terms of build inflation just now?
Yes, it's still a challenging background. So clearly, inflation is coming down. So it's definitely improving. But we are seeing some softening in prices. So the rate of growth that we were seeing sort of 3 to 6 months ago is rapidly reduced. So it's becoming a much more settled environment. So as we move forward, we're hoping actually it'll become much easier to price projects, and we're hoping that'll help us bring more projects forward going forward.
In terms of the development pipeline, how does that break down between buildings to be let to the NHS and buildings to be let to private healthcare providers?
Yeah, so what we are seeing is sort of traditional GP schemes that we would normally be doing. Those are not coming forward at the moment because of that inflation. So we're seeing that the rents that we need to make those work are just not being met in current NHS budgets. So we've only got 1 GP surgery out of the 8. And the others that we've got in the pipeline are a mix of direct NHS, so an ambulance hub, for example. We've got 3 projects in Ireland, and then we've got 2 private facilities under construction as well. So it's a bit more of a bias away from that traditional GP model at the moment.
I'm glad you raise Ireland, because it seems to me that that is becoming an increasingly important focus for you.
Yeah, so the thing about Ireland is that their health system is very deliberately and explicitly investing in primary care centres. I was out visiting our centre in Wicklow last month, and it's about 2 or 3 times the size of a typical project over here in the UK. Huge range of services, a wide range of clinicians on site. And we're actually already working with the Irish NHS about doubling that in size, even though it's already a huge facility. So that kind of strategic investment in these large-scale community facilities is an ideal place for us to be investing in it. It's all part of that getting services out of hospitals and into the community, which is what we need to do more of in the UK, to be honest.
Now, we're only months away from a general election, which, if the polls are right, is going to result in a change of government. Are you anticipating a change of attitude from a Labour government on how it manages the NHS?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say both parties are really committed to doing more out of hospital and doing more delivery of services in the community. I think the difference, a Labour government I think they'll want to make a really big splash, and I think they'll be really motivated to accelerate plans for investment in new facilities as a result. So the last time that there was a Labour government, that was when we saw the single biggest increase in our activity levels. So I think it's definitely a possibility that there'll be a surge of investment into the NHS, and clearly, if we can help support that through delivering more primary care centres, more diagnostic centres, or more clinics in the community, then we'd be delighted to play our part.
Still to come here on Business Live, I'll be bringing you the latest from the markets. Don't go anywhere.
It's really interesting because what they've been able to do is sort of stabilise living breast tissue in the lab for about a week. And what that means is that we can see directly the impact of new drugs and new therapies, how they would respond in the human body, as opposed to just in cells or in our closest animal relatives or anything like that. So this has the potential to really individualise and change treatment for women and men if they get breast cancer as it progresses. But this is very, very early stage. So more and more people are getting breast cancer. The mortality is dropping, so more and more people are living for longer with it or are surviving it. So what we need to do now after this piece of research is actually work out how we use the drugs on this tissue and see what happens next. Because when you look at human tissue as a whole, there are whole loads of things that go into it. The blood supply, the immune response, even just sort of the matrix that it lives in. And that's how we will begin to be able to tell the difference between why do some drugs work in some people and not in others? And when we can individualise care, that's when we will get the better responses. When you see these stories in the newspaper, you think, oh, how is this going to help me tomorrow? How is it going to help my loved one tomorrow? And unfortunately, we are quite a long way from that. But anything that gives us hope when we know that cancer incidence is rising is hugely important. We know that some cases of breast cancer will be related actually to alcohol. There's no safe amount of alcohol that you can have to reduce your risk of breast cancer. The more you drink, the increase your risk is. But what this research was showing, that over 10,000 people died of alcohol-specific related deaths in 2022. And that was the highest amount that has ever been recorded. And by that, I mean specifically liver related to alcohol, or perhaps another thing that was specifically related to that alcohol, as opposed to alcohol increasing your risk of cancer or alcohol increasing your risk of heart disease. And this is really important because we need to look at how do we prevent this alcohol-induced harm. In Wales and in Scotland, they have a minimum pricing per unit of alcohol, which may make a difference. But actually, what is the funding and treatment availabilities for people with drug and alcohol-related harm?
Well, last night's gains on Wall Street, during which the Nasdaq hit a new record high, were followed by declines across the Asia-Pacific region overnight, amid concerns that China's measures to support the property sector, which were announced last Friday, will have little impact. In Europe, here's a picture right now. In continental Europe, all the main indices trading to the downside. The MIB in Milan off by more than 1% after the US Federal Reserve's latest minutes pointed to caution over cutting interest rates. Talking points in mainland Europe today include the Italian insurer Generali. That's down 3.5% in Milan as its results disappointed investors. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 is similarly depressed, off just over a third of 1% right now in a broad-based sell-off. In terms of the leading fallers in the FTSE this morning were the listed water companies. United Utilities and Severn Trent are leading blue-chip fallers after Pennon's results missed expectations. Pennon itself off by just over 7.5%. Not too many gainers to mention in the FTSE this morning, but AstraZeneca's ahead by just over 1.25% after its strategy update. Outside the FTSE, the sandwich and ready meal maker Greencore is up by 18, nearly 19% on news that full-year results will be better than expected. But the sausage producer Cranswick is down 2% after a results update, while the car parts supplier Dowlais is off 6% after warning sales this year will be lower than expected. On the currency markets, not a great deal going on there, to be honest. There's the main currency pairs. Sterling up by just under 1/10% against the dollar. Meanwhile, the oil price has given back all the gains made over the previous two sessions. Barrel of Brent crude currently changing hands at $82.55 a barrel. That's off just under 1.5% on the session. That's it from me. Back at 4:30 this afternoon. Hope very much to see you then. Do stay tuned. Coming up next, it's Jane Secker. See you later. Cheerio.